Very good. Good afternoon. You know why that is. Is Zoom on you?
I am muted.
Yes, can you mute?
I want to try to find it. I'm trying to get on and
Okay, we're live. One second.
I can do that for him. 1 second. Is it those two devices next to each other?
In her head.
Oh, yeah.
A few seconds later.
I mean, there's charts and stuff, there's data and then I turn them into charts so we can try to figure out what the heck it means.
Turn it on, go for it.
We're good?
All
Okay.
right, here we are.
Hey.
Delay of game, but we are here. And we have some good things to cover, so we're gonna go longer than an hour, but not much beyond that. So it is officially 3:40 on December 12th, and we're here meeting on the curriculum committee meeting. This is also live streamed. And we just have one slight agenda adjustment. We're adding a number 2 writing center proposal from Gardner Area High School to fit in with the rest of the remaining items on the agenda. Does anyone have any concern with adding that? Just look for consensus. I think that's fine. All right, then we can call the meeting to order, and Angela, I will pass it to you.
Super, so I will introduce Katie Jones. She is our new to us Gardner Area High School librarian. She was a county teacher of the year and an English language arts high school teacher for a number of years in 2 different high schools in our area. But then just joined Gardner Area High School this fall. And she's been working really closely with our staff, all of our department chairs, some of our science, some social studies, and a lot of our English staff. And she's already established a student library advisory board. And anyway, so there's a lot of great things happening in the library space. And Katie has worked collaboratively with some other faculty and administration at the high school to propose a writing center. And so I'm gonna let her do that, but I just wanna put it in context. We have a learning lab at the high school. Currently it's staffed with 1 teacher and 2.5 ed techs. It's sort of it's not for one particular content area, it's a generalized learning lab, which is different than how we do learning lab in the K-8 spaces. And we have a writing course that's offered to first-year students upon recommendation if it looks like they could benefit from some intensive writing support and instruction so that they'll be more successful in high school with their writing courses. And that is to continue. So that, and Lori Gingras teaches that, and we anticipate that that's still another layer we would want to maintain. So this is a broader representation of how to support student and staff writing across the whole high school community and develop student leadership skills. So I'm gonna let Katie, and she's done some of this kind of work before. I didn't share your background. She has a master's degree.
I'm gonna do that too.
Oh,
So this is not a
fantastic.
quiz.
Amazing.
I'm like,
This
what else
is
do I know?
like good.
Anyway, so Katie will continue to introduce
Yes.
herself and then share the proposal. Because it is a change it does have to be voted on here
Okay,
at this level.
yep.
It would be instituted next school year. This would allow for time to plan and implement appropriately. And normally, this would show up just within our program of studies review that happens in January for the high school. But that's a very large document with a number of other changes that will be coming forth for us to discuss. And so we decided to pull this one out because it's specific, targeted, and we're ready. So we thought we'd get
Perfect.
on the ball and start now. So Katie, floor is yours.
Let's see if it will share my screen. Yay!
Excellent.
It's always amazing when the technology actually happens the way that you want it to.
Yeah.
All right, so today we're going to talk about what a writing center is. If you're not already familiar, some logistics of how it will work at the high school, benefits, and why we feel like it's a good idea for us, budget implications, anticipated obstacles. And I put Q&A at the end, but please feel free to ask questions anytime. I would love to answer them. And sometimes it's really hard to like hold your thoughts. So feel free to ask at the time if you have any. Okay, so as Angela was saying, I am the librarian at the high school, but I'm also a highly qualified English teacher. So I'm very qualified to teach this as a class and not just proposing this out of the blue. So I have a master's in literacy, and the concentration for my program was writing and the teaching of writing. So of all the things that I'm trained for, this is the area that I'm the most developed in. I'm also an adjunct instructor for UMA. I teach a class for pre-service educators on the dimensions of literacy. I was part of the Media Writing Project, and I was a Wilhelm Fellow, which means the Media Writing Project is really based on how do you teach students to write, how do you see yourself as a writer, how do you model writing, those kinds of elements. I was the 2018 Kennebec County Teacher of the Year. I worked in a writing center in college, and I've also used the writing center as an English teacher. So I have all kinds of areas of expertise around this topic. So if you're not familiar, a writing center is a place where any school member, that could be students or staff, like if a staff member is writing a grant proposal with ChatGPT or otherwise, they were talking about that earlier,
Yes.
then they can come seek feedback, bounce off ideas, help develop the format or the organization, those kinds of things. It's a peer tutoring model where students are trained by me, the librarian, to coach others. And students are trained to do one-on-one conferences, which I think is what people typically think of for a writing center, but also to do mini lessons, to do small groups, or I'll talk about this later, but I found it most helpful as an English teacher for writing center coaches to come into my class when I was doing a targeted lesson on like thesis or revising their writing, something like that. It gave more support in the classroom than just me as the singular teacher. I think it's also important to distinguish what a writing center is not. Angela already did some of that work, which was awesome. It's not the writing lab, even though writing center and writing lab sound really close together. We're trying to distinguish those two. So writing lab is the 9th grade course that students take by recommendation of their 8th grade teacher that is a really targeted like skill development in writing. So it is not that course is still staying in place. It's not at all a replacement for that. It's also not an editing system. Coaches should never tell the visitors, the patrons, what to do. So when I was trained on what a writing center is, it was the author holds the pen, but now it's like the computer or the keyboarder. You know, it's kind of evolved from that, but the idea is the same, that a writing center tutor or coach is never going to edit their paper for them or make any changes. They would only be commenting or giving verbal or written advice. It's also not a guarantee of higher grades. One of the adages is we teach the writer, not the writing. And so it's important to know that this is not necessarily going to translate into now you get an A on this paper. We're really focused on how can we teach students to write. So for example, a student might come in and say, I just can't figure out what to say in my paper. I just don't know what to do for this. And the writing center coach might give them some brainstorming examples, some strategies, and they would be able to take those strategies home and use them, but that's not necessarily them getting the work done during that coaching session. And it's not necessarily a support for understanding the content. So if a student comes to us with a history paper, that particular coach might be really strong in science, but maybe not in history. So it's not necessarily content-based, it's more focused on the writing and the format.
Katie, would you say it's structure more than content? Is that a way to look at it?
Yeah, and
Okay.
it could be that the coach and the patron match up perfectly and the coach can help with the content, but it's not necessarily a guarantee of helping with the content.
Yep, very good.
In his foundational essay, The Idea of a Writing Center, Stephen North set out to describe what writing centers do. In a writing center, the object is to make sure that writers, and not necessarily their texts, are what gets changed by instruction. In axiom form, it goes like this: our job is to produce better writers, not better writing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important philosophy, because one of my hopes for the Writing Center is that it will build literacy for the entire school, that it's not just about like this one paper that I want to get a good grade on, or this one thing that I want to accomplish, but really a progression and a development instead of check, now I'm done, I've done the Writing Center. It will function as an English elective, primarily for juniors and seniors. I am open to accepting 10th graders, but it would have to be like a special case. Coaches do need to be recommended to take the class. So recommendations can be from any staff member, including like coaches, ed techs, anyone. And the criteria is not necessarily that they're a strong writer, although that would be great, but I can teach them those writing elements. I'm more looking for students who work well with others, who have habits of work that reflect the values of a writing center, like somebody who seeks feedback or who revises, works hard to improve. Could even be somebody with a strong content knowledge that I can help them translate that into writing, or it could, of course, be a strong writer. Okay, so kind of some of the logistics. So students will be recommended by a teacher to be a Writing Center coach, which teachers are really excited to do. Every time I talk about this, they're like, I have a great student for you. And I'm like, just wait, like I will be asking for them, but not yet. So I think there'll be a really good pool of coaches. Teachers are really excited to recommend students. So during course signups, I'll go to class meetings, also English classes to explain what the class is and what a Writing Center coach does. They can take it as an elective course within the school day, which will run similar to the writing lab, where they have 40 minutes of instruction, and then they'll have 40 minutes to be able to be open for coaching. They can also take it as an independent study, because it will only be offered one period during the day. That might be a hard thing for students to fit in their schedules. So it will be offered through Google Classroom as well. Coaching time beyond that lab time that students will have will be counted as community service. So that could be before school, after school, during study halls, that kind of thing. And coaching, especially at first, will only be under my supervision, only when I feel like students are very comfortable and I'm very comfortable with them coaching on an individual basis. Would they be going into classes without me? Some benefits for teachers. As a teacher myself, I know how hard it is to differentiate for a large class, and the Writing Center is a really great way to add differentiation without putting more of a burden on staff members. So students can be sent down to the Writing Center when it's open to work with coaches, or coaches can be assigned to a class or to work with small groups. So that's a great option for differentiation. It also provides more support for teachers and for students. So it gives them a chance for authentic feedback. And some students are very eager for feedback. So it will give them an opportunity to have that more quickly than a teacher might be able to provide. And it will also help with writing instruction support. I've heard from a lot of content area teachers that they see that their students are struggling with writing, that they're not really sure how to write an essay or a lab report or any of those things. But the teacher is not really sure how to teach them either, because they're not an English teacher. And so coaches can be trained to teach mini lessons on topics and work with students individually on how to write a lab report or how to structure an essay, those kinds of things. Benefits for students. Obviously, we're hoping that it will improve their writing skills. They'll also have more access to people who can help them through the coaches. The Writing Center, I think, is also a great opportunity to help students connect to their school community. So students who aren't maybe involved in a sport or a club have an opportunity to serve their community in a meaningful way and get some of those leadership skills that I really see in sports. But as somebody who's not very athletic, I kind of looked for leadership roles in this kind of format. And I think that is a great opportunity for students. And it's a great resume builder. I earned money in college being a college Writing Center coach. So students could too. So Angela suggested that I tie this to some of our district goals, which I thought was a great way to kind of tie your mission and my mission together. So the Writing Center directly relates to themes from the strategic planning listening sessions, like community connections and flexible curriculum. So because the course hasn't been approved yet, I don't have a syllabus for the class, but I imagine having it be really focused on what teachers want it to be. So not necessarily just lessons that I think students should know, but also based on what teachers are doing in their classrooms. Also, during the strategic listening session, students requested increased opportunities for authentic application of learning and relevancy in possible fields of study, and the Writing Center is potentially a direct response to that request. Also, I think it could be great for positive peer relationships. Peer tutoring builds those positive connections they might not otherwise have an opportunity for. And it's also in line with our district NUIA goals because writing has such a strong symbiotic relationship with other content areas, even math.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Do we in our districts have writing across the curriculum as,
It has historically been an ongoing practice and it's something we're built. In the elementary grades, writing across the curriculum is a natural thing because it's the same teacher across all the content areas. In the middle school, we're working on a much stronger framework to support that.
because it seems like this would be very symbiotic with that as well.
Definitely. So some examples of what this might look like in practice. So the other day I was in a history classroom and the teacher said, I want my students to write this essay on, forget the topic because I'm not a history teacher, but on a history topic. But he said, you know, I can see my students really struggling, but I'm not sure like what the next steps are in writing. Like I know what to teach them for content, but I'm not really sure how to get the writing product that I'm looking for. So I came in and I helped students go through like brainstorming, writing an outline, kind of drafting out their ideas, putting things into paragraphs. And that's the work that coaches can really do also. Science, they can help students understand that like an essay and a lab report are really different formats and like what some of those characteristics look like in practice. English, as an English teacher, I taught 9th and 10th grade most recently, although I've also taught other grades. And I always found that my 9th graders struggled with thesis statements. They just couldn't figure out how to put them into words. They knew what they wanted to say, but the actual wording of the sentence was really hard. And I didn't have enough time to conference with 24 kids. It just wasn't possible. But when I brought in a couple Writing Center coaches in a single 72-minute period, between the three of us, we were able to talk to every single kid and every single kid got help. And so that kind of workshop session, I think, is a really great way to use the Writing Center. Of course.
So if a teacher asks you, you're going to come into the classroom and do
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
Do you wait to be asked or you're going to offer this to every teacher, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And the previous librarian worked really closely with teachers, like did a lot of collaborative projects and instruction. And so like that kind of model and idea is already in place and would be easy to add students to. I've also been working a lot with AP students, and one of the aspects that's tricky for the spring semester is that they're not allowed to get teacher feedback because they're moving them towards independence. And so coaches can be a great way to kind of help through that peer review process and get really quality feedback without relying just on the teacher. In career and wellness classes, they might be working on reflections, so coaches can talk them through like what are some of your life experiences and what might you write about? Reflections can be really hard for kids. And then this fall I did a college and career workshop writing college essays, and that would be a great opportunity for coaches to work with other students on their college essays.
And I like that job application piece because sometimes there's short answers and kids sometimes don't position themselves as well as they could. Like if you get talking to them, you find out like they're really prepared for X, Y, or Z, but they just wrote like a bland statement down instead of what they really could offer the position. And so giving them some time to really think through like, how do you represent yourself honestly and effectively?
I was helping a young man with his resume earlier this fall, and he was like, well, I was like in this summer camp program. And I was like, okay, well, what did you do? And he was like, well, I was the leader and I developed all these things. And I was like, yeah, you need to put that in your resume. So absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a natural thing for all of us. Like at first we just put like, I did this. And then the more you talk about it, the more those things come to light. Okay, so very few budget implications. Since I'm a librarian, I don't already have a teaching schedule, so it would fit in well without having to hire any staff. We will need basic supplies like highlighters, pens, pencils, those kinds of things, but fairly nominal. We're also looking to add tables and chairs to the library. Previously, the Learning Center was housed in the library and it has moved. But regardless of whether we end up having a writing center or not, we'll still be looking to replace that furniture that was moved because of the learning lab.
And both of those items fall under the general high school budget in terms
Right.
of like each department has a supply budget, so we would consider the library supply budget in light of this, and then the like equipment, furniture budget they would have to consider the fact, I don't know if you have a picture in this one, I can't remember, but there's a space and right now it's empty.
Just empty.
Because we moved all that furniture up to the learning center.
Oh,
So she should kind of looking to create a flexible learning space for students to do this work. And if we don't approve the writing center, she still needs to come up with something other than the floor for
Yes.
for students,
Right.
which would be under the general ed high school budget.
Yeah.
We have this nice little space right by the door, but also there's like a bookshelf right there. So students could come into the writing center without feeling like everybody's like watching them
Right.
be coached, which is really important for students. When I brought writing center coaches into my classroom, they would not talk with the coaches until I set up seats in the hallway. And then they would go with a couple of their friends and have conversations out there, but in the classroom, they were like, I don't need any help. And I'm like, yes. But
Right.
they'll really appreciate having a little bit more privacy over there where I can still see them, and the other ed tech can still see them, but it will feel private to them.
We have like a storage of inventory desks and chairs and things that.
I didn't think so, but I was in a math class today, and as soon as that period ended, we moved a table and a chair, or a desk and a chair from that math classroom to the next math classroom, because that classroom is short a desk one period a day. So we don't actually have extra desks
No
and chairs
surplus.
anymore.
Yeah.
I need to ask, as soon as the learning lab furniture went out, I was like, you know, Gabe, Lauren, like everybody, is there somewhere like another table? And they were like, you can have a folding table. And I was like, thanks, but no thanks, you know, like I prefer a real table. So yeah, I tried. We did try that angle.
Yeah.
I'm surprised the district doesn't have a kind of like a warehousing. keep
The
access.
moment, so teachers are really resourceful, and the moment an item is available,
Yeah.
it becomes unavailable.
We
It's
grab it.
consumed.
So we don't have like an excess storeroom where we keep things over the years that have.
And it's not like the
accumulated.
state where you have surplus, right? Or you have like, you use it and you sell it off,
Yeah.
like we don't sell
So
it off or.
We
yeah.
do visit the state surplus.
Yeah. There you
We've
go.
gotten new chairs for a whole
Laptops.
classroom, like a business classroom, that needed to have like chairs that could move around. We got a whole set because one of the state
Right.
outfits, changed out all these, not fancy like this, but movable chairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were able to get them for like $5 a piece instead of,
Yeah.
the
Might-
$65 a piece. So we
Explore that
do
really,
visit
yeah.
the state surplus, it's a former Gardner grad over there, so that always helps too,
Nice.
to get a little phone call in and see what's available,
Yeah.
but we don't have surplus really anywhere
Okay.
for furniture. You would think with 6 schools that we would, but we don't.
Alright.
Be cool if we did.
Right.
Yeah,
But then we need to store it somewhere. That's a whole other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
storage is an issue.
Yeah, I know.
So we've already touched on a lot of these. Students will have lots to do outside of class. So scheduling it as a class ensures that they have both instructional time and coaching time built into the school day. But the inverse is also true, that for others, they're taking AP this and this particular like band class. And since it will only be offered one period, that can be really challenging to schedule, which is why it will also be an independent study. And we've talked about this too, just a second ago, that students will be reticent to use the center because it's vulnerable to share your writing and ask for help and all of those things. And so one way that I'm gonna work on that is by inviting myself, and also hopefully teachers will invite me into their classes to work with their students that way.
And given that we have some traction with staff really curious about this and interested in this and really building up that student leadership piece, I imagine it's not gonna be so hard. I think once students start accessing the coaches, if we support this inside the classrooms, then going to the writing center in the library would be easier than the other way around.
Yeah.
So what kinds of questions do you have for Katie?
ask me all the things.
You are very thorough, and were you in Mrs. McNaughton's 20% class? That's why I recognize you.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. I think you laid it out well, and I actually appreciate all aspects of it, helping kids in every level, right? Those that want their leadership, those that need the help, and then maybe you'll get some of those to go from needing help to being the ones that advocate and do the one-on-one.
Absolutely,
That would be really
yes.
awesome. Great.
My
Yeah.
son went here, and when he went to Orono, he had a wonderful English teacher who, he just knew how to approach a paper. But that's depending on where you are, what teacher you have, so if it's across the board, that's great. A philosophy of how to do it all.
You draw all your coaches out of students that are teachers. Where are you gonna get most of your coaches from?
Students, juniors and seniors, yep.
That takes a while to build up that reserve of people.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many students will be interested and be able to fit it in their schedules, and so many students are busy, but I do think it provides a unique opportunity that we don't otherwise have, and I think a lot of students, like we talked about from the strategic listening committee, are really looking for leadership roles and ways to serve their community. I think that's something that's really impressed me coming into Gardner, is how service-minded students are, how much they want to help, and I think that benefits this program.
So you don't see that as being a big obstacle?
I don't, no. That could be naive, but so far I don't.
I have a question actually that Jeff just made me think of.
Yeah.
If you were to think about success in a few years, how many students would be ideal to have like a thriving center? over
Yeah.
time?
I think the number that I have in my head is like 15 to 20, but honestly, it kind of depends on their schedules, because what I'd really love is for the Writing Center to be open as much as the library's open. So like from 7 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., we have coaches available to meet with students, to go into classrooms, like to do all these things. And so I could have 15 students who have the same study hall, and like that wouldn't benefit us. You know, like that wouldn't
Yeah.
actually matter. Or I could have 5 students who are able to spread out their study halls and we're open more. So I think there's that balance of like students who really want to do the work and who have the time to do the community service aspect. And that magic 8 ball of scheduling of like, we just don't know how all those things are gonna domino out.
So while you have an ideal number, 15 to 20, really the characteristic you're really looking for over time is whether or not the center can provide services through the coaches throughout the day. Do you get it's successful when you feel like throughout the day there's opportunities for students to access coaching either in classes or in the library?
Yeah, and also for staff to have the support they need. Like if they're like, we're doing an essay and I need 2 coaches, I can say, we have 2 coaches, they're coming to you on Thursday. Which I think will be a challenge for a little bit of building up those numbers.
So where I was going where I thought you were going, like that enrollment, like how many do we need to sustain it, right? To make
Yeah.
it, but it sounds like, from what I'm seeing, the opportunity is like, let it ride and see how it goes. It's gotta kind of organically happen, and then you gotta have the students kind of embrace it and continue it, and then hopefully it'll continue to build. Yeah.
Have you ever
Awesome.
done this anywhere before?
I have not ever run a writing center, but I have a friend who's a librarian at my previous school who we worked together to bring the writing center into my classes. So I've done it on the other side.
Pretty good success?
Yeah,
Okay.
it works really well for my students.
What school was that?
Marina Cook?
Any other questions?
And so in the future, we'll have a syllabus on how you're teaching the coaches to coach.
Yes.
And the process of writing a paper or resume and breaking that out.
Yes, I think the absolute first thing before we even open will be, how do you work with other people? How do you build those relationships? How do you make somebody feel comfortable? Those life skills that so many students just need a little bit of development on and can really run with that. And then, yes, what is a comma? How do you use it? How do you structure a paragraph? Those kinds of things.
I'm always amazed. I was an English teacher for 25 years and so thesis statements. And it very much was a case of, do you have your body paragraphs first? You know, you do your opening after you have your content, and then you do your conclusion after that.
Mhm.
And a lot of the kids wanted to start off with the thesis statement. I'm like, you don't even know what you're writing about yet.
Yes.
Okay.
Very common pitfall of writing to your point instead of starting with your point.
If we're in a good
Yeah, I
place,
was just gonna
we
say.
need to have someone make a motion, and then a second and a vote, so we know whether we're.
So I would gladly make the motion to accept the Writing Center proposal as described by Katie Jones.
Second.
Very good. All those in favor? You can vote
Oh, we can vote?
Yes. We're all in favor. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Look
Thank you
forward
so
to
much for
hearing
having
about
me.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
can't wait to come back and tell you all the things.
awesome. Sounds great.
Katie did share with me the slides, and so I
Oh,
will
great.
attach them to the notes, to the minutes, sorry, the minutes,
Perfect.
so that you have access to them.
Thank you.
And feel free to email me with any questions or
Excellent.
happy to talk anytime.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you
Have a
so
good
much. We
afternoon.
appreciate it.
See you all.
Here we go. Now we have data.
Yes,
I feel like we need some like John Cena music. You guys, I love data. Sorry, I'm a nerd right now. I'm
Terry, I'm
nerding out.
gonna find my, I'm gonna find my email.
Hey, you got this.
I have a lot of tabs open.
I know, I feel that.
Oh,
Just
Not
make sure you're
pretty.
muted.
yeah, hang
Okay.
on 2 seconds.
Actually, while you're doing that, Angela reminded me that we didn't go around and say who we
Yes.
were.
Oh.
My bad. So if we could all just introduce ourselves.
Diane Potter?
Melissa Tracy,
Joanne O'Brien.
Jeff Hanley.
thank you. Uh-oh, yep, that was me yesterday. Zoom has an update, Terry, shocking.
I just used it yesterday.
I know,
too.
that's what happens.
Join a meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if you go to the link, I think, yeah, there you go.
is. Where'd it go? She's very secure.
That's good. Oh, I'm like, did she write it? No.
Okay. Join. And then I need this open like this. Got it.
Safe.
Okay, share my screen.
Okay. Do you want to show off your video on your Zoom? You can if you want.
How do I do what?
Like, oh, you're on an Apple, aren't you? So I don't know where everything is. Okay.
Okay, so we're a little late in our fall assessment data overview. We usually do it October, sometimes November. But the state changed, as you know, the state changed the window for the assessment, the state assessment, and then they changed access to the data. So it should be coming more quickly after the window closes at the end of October than it did this year. This year, at the end of October, when the window was supposed to close, we had the tragedy in Lewiston. And so then they postponed the closure for 10 more days. And then from there, they needed 2 more weeks at least to clean up all the data across the various data entry points. And so we didn't actually get access at the level that you would need to see it until December 6th. So here we are in December 12th, and I'm sharing the fall data. And that's awkward a little bit because in January, we start the winter assessment window. So you're just going to get information, and our students are already going through assessments again in the winter. But at least it will give you a heads up as to where we are. So I jumped right in, just so you know.
There we go.
So to give you an overview, we use, I have these slides because I had compared them to the national trends with NAEP last year when I gave this presentation. And the up through 2021, we were following all of the national trends. So our data, this chart looks like it. I just added the current one on just so you could see. So in 8th grade, our math proficiency, as you can see, 33% is where we're at now. So we're slowly making progress back up, and you can see we dipped just before the pandemic, or right around the whole time of the pandemic, and then we're slowly kind of creeping out of it. In math in 8th grade, this is just overview, you'll have much more detail in a minute. And then in reading, you can see a significant change in 4th grade, where we're starting to recover pretty significantly back to pre-pandemic levels. Interestingly, right now, our 3rd grade doesn't look as promising at the moment, but that is typical of our 3rd grade any year.
Right.
And so we're hoping with some of the new, with the ongoing implementation of the curriculum, the new curriculum and instructional programming over the last few years, that this 3rd grade class that's been struggling since kindergarten they keep making incremental progress, that we can get them enough so by the time they get to 4th grade, they're reflecting this similar trajectory. But we'll find out. So let's look into the details. So just as a reminder, our fall assessments, we use Northwest Evaluation Association. In grade 2, it is our local assessment called MAP Growth that we've always used. In grades 3 through 8, 3 through 8 and 10, it is what we now call the through year, and that's what we spent all last month trying to understand the difference. And this is where I'm gonna get you confused. In the fall, there's almost no difference. It's the same bank of questions and we get a RIT score. And then at the end of this, I'm gonna show you the spring scores because you never got to see that part of it.
Oh, right.
The summative side. So remember how the state now has 2 parts to their assessment, 2 scores. They have RIT like we always know, so that allows us to see the trajectory over time. And then in the spring, they have this summative score that also just got released. So we're going to look, we're kind of flip back in time at the end of this. Trying not to be confusing. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
And then in K and 1, we have in the fall stopped using NUIA. The score it provides is a very overview. It's an overview foundational literacy score, and that does not tell us much. And it has some other 2 other indicators, but K1 is all about foundational literacy. So we switched to Early Bird, which is an assessment that's been designed by the Nadine Gabb's lab at the Boston Children's Hospital and vetted by the Florida Center on Reading Research and Yakov Petchov and his research entity. And it has a pre-K non-reader, kindergarten and 1st grade assessment. And in kindergarten, there's like 13 subtests, and they're all based on the highest predictors of reading success. And you get a score for each one of them so that we can then really zone in and say, okay, it's deletion that's the issue in winter in kindergarten or it's letter sounds or letter ID or non-word reading. And so all of these types of indicators are what help us determine if someone has a high prediction of word reading or it also acts as a screener for dyslexia. And so it's a much more diagnostic tool for us. And so we've started using that instead of NUIA because it gets to where we have actionable data. We can do something about it, whereas just kind of monitor foundational literacy scores. You can't do a lot about that. And then in MAP, in the elementary school, we use iReady because it's a very informative assessment tool that aligns well with our math curriculum. And then in 3 through 5, we have to also add the state assessment, which is we weren't comfortable getting rid of iReady because it's so valuable. The teachers appreciate iReady. NUIA is something we're prepared to do.
You being required to get rid of it?
No, but we try not to over-assess our students. And so it was a discussion we've had. But the iReady provides us It's connected to our personalized learning platform. It's connected to some intervention resources. And it's a little more dynamic, and the reporting structure is more dynamic, so we can learn more about our kids and act on it more effectively right now than we could with NUIA, whereas NUIA kind of looks at the global picture.
Is there any possibility for getting a waiver to keep using that?
We can keep using it. We pay for it. Yeah, we just can't get a waiver from NUIA because that's a state mandate
It
based
would
on
just be
federal
more,
law.
yeah, I know when we did the double testing, right, to switch, my kids
Yeah.
were like, I get to take another test, right? And it was like, I'm lucky, mine are pretty good. I was the kid that stressed about anything test related, and they're like, oh, we just did the thing, you know, but that's a lot for
Yeah.
young ones, like mine was in second grade when we
Yeah.
did that, yeah.
So a couple things to note, last spring, I would say we definitely over-assessed students, but I brought that to this committee and said, this is
Right.
why.
Yeah.
It was a one-time deal. It was
Right.
because of the timing of the way the state was transitioning assessments, because of our district data goals. There was lots of reasons for it. We kind of swallowed the pill and got through it.
Yep.
That's not gonna happen again. And this NUIA, this winter, we're not going to do in grades 3 through 5 because we have iReady in the winter. We're only gonna do fall and spring as required by the state. So we are gonna release
Perfect.
that piece
Yeah.
and only do iReady in the winter. So we are trying to make good decisions on behalf of the students.
Thank you for that.
So overview for literacy. As a reminder, our district goal, a long-term goal, is to get to 80% of our students to meet proficiency in ELA as reported through the NUIA reading assessment. We've never hit 80%, just so you know, but it's good to have a strong target. In 2023, we had hoped to hit 60%. We did not. We did in some grade levels. We did not everywhere. Last spring, I provided a presentation and you have access to that. So we had to make some adjustments to our 2024 target. So we're looking at a 50% target by end of year so that we can get to closer to 70% or maybe 80% in some grade levels by 2025. So still higher than we've ever done. And we changed our kindergarten indicator to reflect the tool that we use, Early Bird, and specifically the predictor of word reading assessment subtest that we get 80% of our kindergarten at the level of that, because that's a high predictor for strong reading. So that's where we're at. That's our goal. So 50% is what you want to keep in mind, because I'm not going to actually show you Early Bird today because I want to show it to you separately. It's such a unique assessment. So, so that you can see where we're at, red line is the 50% mark that we're trying to achieve by the end of the year. Now, if we achieve something at the fall, that doesn't mean we do it by the end, because what this assessment does is it looks at the year-end standard and it says, just benchmarks it, where should they be in the fall, where should they be in the winter, and where should they be in the spring. So just because we get it in the fall, if the kids don't continue to learn actively through the year, they might not meet the spring benchmark, right? And so in the fall, though, we're higher than we typically are. Oh, whoops, I forgot, sorry. I should say 50% in red on the bottom. So as you can see, grade 2 is the first, 44, then grade 3 drops, then we go up in 4, 5, up to 50% in grade 6, close to 50% in grade 8, in the 45 and 43 and 9, 10. And so those 8, 9, 10 numbers are higher than we've seen, which is great, for the beginning of the year. Grade 4 is higher than, and grade 6 is also higher than we've seen for the beginning of the year. So it's promising that if we keep the learning trajectory moving, that we might meet our target or exceed our target by the spring.
With the breakout based differentiated by sex and nationality and socioeconomic
I will show you
standards.
all that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have all of it yet. I will show you the spring results, which at the end. I can't break it down until the spring, based on the way the new state test is set up.
Yeah, they give it to us in dribs and drabs
Yeah.
and then,
Yep.
yeah.
We can do some things at the school or class level where, teachers can look at that and do.
And in terms of just figuring out why this grade is down
Right.
and this grade is down, but then previous grade is up? Is there some anomaly in that particular
Yeah, usually I
cohort?
can speak to it for the most part.
She usually knows her data pretty well and can, yeah.
So this is cohort. So if you look at fourth grade, it's when they were in third grade last year, they were at 45%. And when they're in fourth grade this year, the 2023 blue, they're at 52% now, okay?
Wow.
This isn't fourth grade, same teacher, different kids. This is
Right,
fourth grade, same kids over time.
over time.
So that's why you don't have anything for second grade because they didn't test
didn't do
NUIA
it
in
yet.
first grade, okay? So the blue is where they are this fall. And the red is where those same kids the year before were. So as you can see, they're improving fall to fall as a cohort, with the exception of seventh grade is remaining stable. And ninth grade declined a little.
Mhm,
Not statistically significant,
right.
but not enough growth right now to demonstrate growth over time so much. But all other areas, you can see that they're growing year over year. Our seventh grade is also our largest class district-wide.
I was gonna say, I just looked at that the other day, honestly, to see the counts and the minutes from last month. And
Yeah.
seventh grade is, yeah,
And when we took this, it was a little smaller, but
150, 149.
169.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yeah, we're up to 170 right now.
Mm,
That's the biggest class we've had in a long time. So there's been a lot of movement in that class, so I'll be curious to see how that goes over time and what that impact is. So that's in reading. And I did not break into the strands. I tend to do that in the spring. But if you want it, I can bring it forward at some point. And the strands are things like informational text, language skills, those sorts of things, or geometry versus algebra. But after a while, you start just seeing numbers and it gets like, after a while, you kind of get a little zoned out. So anyone would. So our district goals in math is also 80%. I mean, we're shooting high here. And our goal last year was 50%. And based on the spring report you received, we actually we met or exceeded that very much or very close to it at the elementary grades. And in the middle and high school grades, we did not achieve 50%. And so that is why we have a differentiated target now for this year. So we're still trying to aim high. Let's move those K through 5 students up to 65% to get them closer to that 80% target. And let's work on getting 6 through 10 to the 50% level all the way through. So still trying to move the needle. So our iReady at the K5 level, this is one of the more confusing documents we go through every year. I use the same chart because I'm trying to build our proficiency towards it. There's 2 ways to read this chart. The first way are the orange bars. That's like a benchmarking tool. So iReady says if you're in 0, which is kindergarten, you need to know these things to be ready for kindergarten at the beginning of the year. Or say second grade, you need to know these things to be ready for second grade at the beginning of the year, and you take your fall assessment and we check on that based on what the standards are. So when you're looking at a beginning of the year view, our kindergarten was ready for kindergarten. Our third grade, 61% of them were ready for third grade math based on this one snapshot. Now we have other snapshots, but this is one. And so you can kind of see second through fifth grade kind of falls in the same line. As we get more complex, right? We have a cohort of students that we need to really try to target in and provide stronger interventions. The other way to read this is the standard view, which is the standard is here at the end of the year. Of the questions that we asked related to that standard, how much do students already know end of year standard? So 12% of our kindergarteners, based on the questions asked, knew end of year material. So that's interesting. That doesn't mean they know it every single day or,
Right.
it just means
At
like,
that moment.
we're
Yeah.
adding two-digit numbers above 10 and they were able to answer those questions, then at that moment, they knew that material to that degree. When you go through a whole unit, they might not know all the complexities that could be presented. So as you can see in fifth grade, that's one of the higher marks we've had. 24% of the students knew some of the end of grade standards in fifth grade. But 66% of the students were ready for beginning of the year. So you can see we have, what that basically means is there's like 34% of students who are not quite ready for grade level learning. And there's 24% of students who are absolutely ready for grade level learning, if not more than ready.
Right.
Right? And then you have a cohort in between. That's sort of how to interpret that. Like, how big is that gap across the grades?
Yeah, third grade is weird.
It's always been this way.
That's what you told me, yeah.
It doesn't matter which standards we're using.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter which assessment we're using. If we use NUIA or iReady, we get the same sort of profile. Third grade is a dip. And so one thing we're doing this year, we've done it a few years ago, 5 years ago. We hired someone from Maine Math and Science Alliance to come in using our Title II grant money. I think that's where it came from. And so Julia McDonald Plum is working with them full days, at least 6 days, plus some continuous work in between each cycle. And they're doing some really deep dive learning around their standards, their progressions, then they're trying, and strategies. And then they're trying those out and applying that learning with their third graders. Then they're coming back to the table. Today was one of them. They were here from 8:30 to 3 with her. And they're analyzing the results, understanding what the implications are, and kind of going through that cycle again with a slightly different lens to try to see if we can crack the code a little bit. Like, what is going on? And you know, it's not unusual for it to be in second or third grade in districts all over Maine. But ours just happens to always be third grade.
Do we have a way to advance kids that say are, in that 24% to actually move into, say, the next grade's classroom?
So we have three ways. One, we have teachers that differentiate instruction based on the specific data set that's a little more nuanced than this overarching.
Different strands, yeah.
Yep. So they can think about the unit and what we get a prerequisite report per unit that says which kids are, based on what they need to know to be effective, which kids need a little pre-teaching, which kids are ready, and which kids are beyond, and then they can design their unit of instruction based on that. So that's the differentiation at the classroom level. We have some students who are considered gifted and talented in math specifically under our REACH program, and we have REACH services, and she can provide kind of, a lot of it's done through a problem-solving lens, but some acceleration. And then we have some students who are well beyond that, and they can attend another grade level. So usually it's 1 or 2 students a year. We've had students leave Riverview or start the day at the middle school, period 1, which is before the elementary school starts, have a period 1 6th grade math class, have supported transportation back to the elementary school, and have the rest of their day at the elementary school. We have done that, and it's based on, whether they qualify through our MTSS system. Yep. So it's like 3 avenues, depends on the where the student is at.
Yeah, level of the student.
Yeah, and I mean, it can be within the elementary school too, that way, that flexibility. We see it more in that 5th grade space though, or they have they maxed out and really need more or not.
And is REACH like 4th to 12th grade or?
It's technically 3rd grade
Okay,
through
yeah.
12th grade,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
And there's an identification process.
Right.
And all that.
I know enough to be dangerous, but I know that much. I figured I'd give you the context, yeah.
So again, just as a reminder, our target in K-5 is 65%, so it's sort of the red line. This is the beginning of the year, so we're on track. If we can keep the pace up and the student learning up as the standards get more complex across the year, we should be in good shape to meet our goal. Okay, there we go. And then this is just another way to look at it by cohorts of students over time rather than the way we just looked at it. Grade 1, this is a class of 2035. in fall of 2022, in kindergarten, they came in super high. And in first grade, something about my left column is wrong. My percentages are wrong a little bit. I don't know why. Let me go back. 12. I don't know what's going on with my chart. So let's ignore the 0 to 25% at the moment. I have to figure out what I did to make that happen. But you'll get the trend line still. From kindergarten to first grade, it's typical for us to have a drop. Again, kindergarten standards and first grade standards have a big change, but we've always seen first grade do well at the end of first grade with one exception, which is the full year of the pandemic. And then class of 2030, so you can see class of 2031, our current fifth grade. So this year, you can see their yellow proficiency bar is pretty high. The last year's was lower and the year before that was lower. So you can see they're increasing their readiness in the fall significantly over time. Do you see how that works? So the fourth grade, they had 2 years of fairly stable readiness, third grade and second grade and third grade. And then by the time they got to fourth grade, they were much more prepared. So, and then you can go down to the next class and you see which is interesting, that's our third grade class right now. And remember, our third grade class is our low class, but look, they're stepping up each year. Even though they're still low across the like the whole grades, all the grade spans, they're still increasing as a cohort year over year in their readiness. It's just, we wish those bars were higher up the chart. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's an old one, it shouldn't have been there. And then grades 3 through 10 are using NUIA instead of iReady. So you can see the numbers drop a little bit using the NUIA instead of iReady. And that's because it's a different tool, it's a different reference mechanism. One is norm reference, this is norm referenced. iReady is criterion referenced. Criterion is standards, NUIA is normed, is how they do compared to other students in the cohort. So we're starting in the 30s in the elementary grades, and we want to get to 65. We'll probably get to 50 using NUIA. We'll get to 65 using iReady. iReady is criterion reference against the standard. But if you look at our 8th and 9th graders in a norm-based reference tool, we're higher. It's confusing. But, and again, our 7th grade is of concern. So that part is stable. Does that make sense? So using two different ways of looking at it. With our largest class, we've been spending some time honing in there. To be honest with you, 30s in the fall, that's what we've seen for years besides the pandemic. And then it grows over time.
Even before the
Yep.
pandemic.
Yeah. For the fall. So this is where I'm switching gears. So in terms of this, I'd love to start seeing kids in the 40s and 50s, right? And then moving up to the 60s and 70s by the spring. We have never gotten to the 60s and 70s using this tool for, 17 years. I think that we've been shifting the system enough over time that we're going to start seeing growth over time. Once we can close the gap, we have a significant group of students where we need to close the gap. And then we also have a group of students who are having kind of work refusal strategies. And we've got to kind of get a hold of that, try to understand that a little better. And that's not just homework, that's like in class even.
Just not doing the work, yeah.
So and it's not so much in the early grades, it's more in our adolescent level stages that we've got to kind of get a hold of that and understand that. So to flip gears and say, what's that other report that the state's going to send out to the families? We're going to send out to the families on behalf of the state's reporting mechanism soon. That's that second piece, which is the summative score. So you get the RIT score, that helps us understand growth over time against the content and normed against other students
Throughout
across the
state.
country.
Oh, and this, okay,
Then this one is criterion referenced for state standards.
Yep.
Only in Maine,
yep.
only in Maine.
And the visual bar is kind
The
of.
visual bar gives you
yeah.
the numbers, so if a student is in the 1500s up to 1525, so there's only a 25-point scale for
Right.
proficient, you want green or blue. There's a 75-point scale for blue.
I know, and the other
I
two
don't
as
get
well,
that.
89 and then 22 or 21,
Right.
like,
So that's
Interesting.
where you'd have to like go talk to some, statisticians and
Right.
stuff to understand
Like
how
why
that
those
scale
numbers,
is determined, but though, that's the scale we're operating from.
mm,
And then each school gets the median scale score and then they get the average score. So the high school, and as you can see, this is still new to me, so I'm learning. The high school, this is the report, this part of the report is what's gonna show up on the state data dashboard
Right.
eventually. That the newspapers pick up on and say, this is how this school's doing compared to this school. And they also, it's where our accountability system matters. So they have a tiered system, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And you have to meet all this data set. And it's not just your overall score, it's your overall score for males, your overall score for females, your overall score for students with a second language, for race, and for students with identified special needs. You have to have scores for each of those categories and they earn you points. And if you're deficient, that's where you add, you get, well, you get the points for your deficiency,
Yeah.
and if you get a certain number of points, you fall in tier 3 category and you have supports, a certain number of points you fall in tier 2 and tier 1. So sometimes like high schools will fall into tier 2 because their graduation rate is slightly declining. So it's chronic absenteeism, it's graduation rates for the high school. It's your academic profile in English and math, and in English and math, how that plays out for your smaller populations. All of that determines whether or not you get state support and are considered a tier 3 school, a tier 2 school, or a tier 1 school. Tier 1 is just kind of pay attention. Tier 3 is intensive coaching support, professional development, all of that. We have one school in tier 3 right now, but the state hasn't activated the tier 3 because they're waiting for these scores. I don't know, and federal support
Some guidance.
of guidance,
Yeah.
and then they'll decide what we're gonna do. So we've been in this holding pattern of one school being identified as a tier 3, but no actual supports coming
Mm.
yet. And then we have 2 schools in tier 1, which is kind of like you're on notice, just pay attention. So Pittston is tier 3, and and they're only like a few points off on some subgroups. That's what's causing it.
Yeah.
Riverview is tier 1. It's only one little category, and the high school is tier 1, one little category. So as you can see here in math, we're in the below state expectations as average, but we're only 2 points away from state expectations.
Yeah.
And in literacy, we're at state expectations. And then in the middle school, they report it by grade level instead of building. Because high school is only 10th grade. So middle school, I put in, so you could see, in math across the board. So this is where, see that median score is 1498, but we're in the yellow, and we're in the yellow.
Mm.
In grade 6, we're at 1501, which means we're proficient as a median score. But then when what's the difference? Median, mode.
Yeah.
Mode is most frequent.
Yeah.
Median is,
Like the sum of the,
yeah.
yep.
But based on the unique data set of all of the students, we fall just in the yellow. So there's like 2 categories.
Oh, I see. So it's like, yeah, whichever factor weighed more.
Yes.
Made it be
Yellow.
influence it
So
to
we
be
should be in
yellow.
the green, but there's just some factors that brought
Yeah.
the kids down just a
Yeah.
little.
Okay.
But again, you're still very, very close to.
Very, very
1,300.
close, yep. And then in 7th and 8th grade, we're 3 points off and 5 points off in math. But in literacy, we're meeting the state expectations. I know, it's interesting.
I was wondering if the bar at the top was gonna change, but I see it isn't. So whatever that is the core
Stable.
of their
Yep,
functionality of those numbers.
yep.
Interesting.
And remember, this is the 4-point scale, the 4-digit scale.
Right.
Because the RIT score, which is what I showed you all first, that we use over time and compare and all,
Yeah,
that is, and it will help us with growth over time. That is 3 digits.
3 digits,
And they
right.
didn't want what's formative, helps us as an instructional tool, to be confused with the summative, that's a federal requirement.
Right,
And it has a different bank of questions.
yeah,
Remember, the summative is grade level questions plus or minus 1 grade. Formative is the whole bank of questions across all the grade, adaptive until the kid gets to their central space, and then it says this is where the child is at. And then you work from there.
mm,
So that's why this is 2 reports and confusing.
yeah,
At the elementary level, I tried to summarize this for you. If you look on the math side, we have 3 elementary schools at every grade level, even though we have 4 elementary schools because we have a K2 building and a 3-5 building. And so you can see that we have all 3 schools in grades 3 in math and 5 in literacy meeting the state expectation and above 1500s. We have grade 4 in math. 2 schools are meeting and 1 school is just shy because the median across is 1501. So the median is 1501, but when you separate them by school, 1 school is below and 2
Below.
schools are at.
yeah,
So but there can't be that far below to have the median be 1501, okay? And the same for grade 5 math. 2 schools are, you see, they're all very close to that point between below and at for those numbers to act like that. And then for literacy, it's the same concept, just flipped. It's grade 3 and 4 instead of grade 5. So while we have some schools in yellow, they're very close to green, so we have room to be able to make a difference. No one's well below. That's good news.
Right.
Now, it's 1 school, 1 school, 1 school, 1 school. So is that the same 1 school?
No.
So it's different schools?
That's why I did it this way.
Okay,
What we'll do is this is the first time we've ever seen the summative scores, so I think next spring when we get both, we'll have the year before and this year, we'll start kind of differentiating. I'm always a little bit cautious at the board, at this level,
yeah,
to get to
yeah.
the place where we get to classrooms. Because
Right.
that's not our role is to look at the big picture.
Yeah.
And then that starts becoming identifiable, and we're not supposed to share identifiable data.
Well, and grade 3 is funny in this because it looks fine, right? I mean, the other thing about indication of knowledge, and then we're here and they're kind of meeting.
This is what I was hoping
Yeah.
you'd notice.
Yeah.
So if
So
we
it's
go
kind of-
back to paying attention to time, folks,
Yeah.
because I know that's a thing. If we go back to grade 3 here,
Yeah,
remember they're one of the lower grades. Did I have another one on this one? I can't remember. No, not this one.
that,
And then what would be grade, in grade 3 is
Right in
class
the
of
middle.
2033, they're
Yeah.
also significantly lower, right? Using our iReady tool. And then,
but they're improving.
and in NUIA,
Yeah,
that overarching picture of grades 3 through 10, grade 3 is 33,
Yeah,
so that's still lower. Then you go to the summative, so those are all based on you go to the summative, which is the main specific test based on the main specific standards and a bank of questions that only adapt 1 grade level above and below, and it's our new add-on to our state assessment, and it's only assessed in the spring. But it's where our accountability measure is, and we go to 3rd grade.
right, and they look fine.
And in math,
Yeah,
they look good.
it's so strange.
So parents are going to get individual student reports that say on the summative score, they're on track. And on their RIT score, they're not on track.
And they're used to getting, as a parent, I can speak to, my kids know their 3-digit RIT score. Some of them get it right after their test, and then you see it. And so I have a 3rd grader, so that's why this also just intrigues me. Because, you know, the teacher does a good job of just sort of showing perspective, and it's like, so then to see this, you're like, well, then this looks okay. So the state would say our 3rd grade is normal and expectations, but then we look at those other charts and they seem to be the low end of everything, right? It's,
So in the RIT
Yeah.
score is norm referenced
Yeah.
and the summative score is criterion referenced, but the iReady score is criterion referenced, so those should look similar and they don't.
right,
And iReady though has been around a lot longer. It
Right.
also has a student bank as deep as the NUIA student bank.
So I'd have to wonder, what is the fault in the NUIA?
Well, we don't know. We've never done this test before. It's the very
Yeah.
first time we've ever seen this data. I'm sure, and I know that there was a ton of work put into it.
Mm.
It's just the discrepancy is hard to understand for everyone. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means for some reason we're proficient here and we're not proficient here. So the way I lean is I use the tools that we know that have been used year over year over year until this assessment is something we understand better.
yeah,
And I think also if it's the first assessment that is lower, if you can raise that, then of course.
Then this
should-
automatically raises.
Exactly.
Yeah.
right,
But that's just the problem with especially new tests and things that are being evolved, and especially if you don't actually get to see the tests. Junk data is junk data, so if it's not reliable and verifiable, it can be really hard to try to explain to parents, don't worry. Or,
I mean-
these are the things that we have to work on.
I have to say the state has done a lot of years of work on this, so I am not gonna speak to that part of it. They're working with a national group, they're working with the federal regulation, they have a lot of documents and tools on the state site, you're all welcome to go look at them.
yeah, pretty impressive.
They have provided more transparency than they've ever provided in a state assessment. I will give them credit for all of that. And if you like that sort of stuff, it's kind of interesting to read. But it is new to us, so we're all gonna take a little time. For me and for you, this is where our accountability sits.
Yep.
And this is what gets publicly over time, I don't know, but since the spring scores just came out and it was a brand new test, how that will land, but in the future, this section, this is what is our accountability measure that gets public and gets posted and all that. So that's why this holds weight that way.
Yeah.
For a parent, I would still wanna see my iReady score and my RIT score, if those things matter to me.
Mhm.
Because that I understand, and then this is a second assessment that's layered on top of it. But it does, it may make you feel good if you see yourself in green.
Now, of course, on report cards,
None of this goes on report cards.
right, so they're just looking at based on the tests and the assessments that are given in the classroom setting.
Student performance in the classroom. Yeah,
Yeah.
or not, we may sometimes send a report home alongside report cards,
Yeah.
cause we're sending the mailing home at the same time, like in June. But this does not factor into any report cards at any level.
Do we sometimes have cases where there is an extreme discrepancy between these kind of formative test scores and the classroom performance
I mean,
assessment?
there's always the random one, or you look over time and the kid's been meeting and all of a sudden this one test, they dropped way down here and then they went right back up. It's like, that was a bad day.
Yeah,
Something wasn't
right.
going right, when you see it
Yeah.
all the way along and then, or that something in their home life was going on that particular season.
Yep.
But that part of the report is nice because you can see
You can
over
see
time
it,
where
the
the kids
trend.
are at the trends, yep.
Yep,
And it's all information, and that's the point, right? A report card is information communication. This is information. You have to decide what that means to you.
yeah, I would say, Joanne, to share a quick story, when we had another school in this system that has closed, I had a child who was in a combined classroom with 3 grades, and I was concerned about meeting grade level, and then went to a different school, and that was probably the first time I cared to look at those reports, because I heard the teacher say, she is at the benchmark she should be for her grade level. She probably benefited from that class, but it's nice that she's in with her peers now for these reasons. And I could like see it in writing. It was right there, you know, so that was helpful for that piece.
Something that was standardized during
Yeah.
such a point of
Yeah.
transition.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, it depends on how you're using them.
yeah,
For us, just so you know, generally speaking, some of the strategies we're engaging in, we did last year, we're continuing. We're always analyzing our data, we're always trying to understand what that means. We're always trying to get down to the student level to say, this is one piece of data in a profile of a student, not the only piece of data. And what does this mean for providing instructional support? And so then, you know, that's in our multi-tiered system of support framework. Of course, we have a handbook to support that. And then in particular, because we have a host of students that are significantly below grade level at the middle school, for a lot of compounding reasons over time that we've adjusted now at the elementary school, we have designed, and if you saw my newsletter that I sent out to you all in November from the Curriculum Connections newsletter, this was discussed in it, and so feel free to go back to that. But this is a strategy we're using, and we're finding it actually is accelerating student learning. So we
Nice.
already have some students who've already gone a whole grade level, and it's only December, so it's exciting.
Nice.
And then briefly, science. We've had a new science assessment for 3 years. It's gone from a paper-based science assessment that's really was more content oriented to a digital 4-part science assessment in grades 5, 8, and 11, or 5, 8 in the third year of high school. That is very much tied to both content and science practices. And by having it digital, they can do some like scenario building and stuff, and the kids answer questions, not just content questions, but if then statements and I don't know, all kinds of other unique assessment questions that we haven't usually seen in the past. This district has always been known for having pretty high performance in our science. The first year, the data was not released to us. Last year, because it was like their state benchmarking data. Last 2 years ago, the data, I don't remember what happened to that data. This year, we got a report for last spring, and we just got it a week ago. So I decided to add it in here whenever I put the
Nice.
agenda
Yeah.
out. It is only summary data at the moment. I am still waiting for, we have a CSV file with a lot more data, and I have to make sense of it.
Oh, gosh.
It's a huge CSV file. We have a platform where they're housing the data that's supposed to do those visualization strategies and make this data meaning, but they don't have a contract to do that. They only have a contract to host the CSV file, so I may be asking for some
Shocking.
support on some
Yep, no
categories,
worries.
but so all I can show you right now is the summary data. But
Yeah.
don't you worry, I'll dig into it to understand more. I just haven't had time yet. So here's our fall overall science performance data. Let's look at grade 5 so I can talk you through it. SAU is us, that's our whole district. We have 3 buildings in grade 5. So our average is 30, whatever, the score 34. Our state average is 34. So our students in 5th grade across our district are performing at the state average. So that's good news. However, if you look at our actual proficiency levels, at is the highlighted green and the dark green is above. So we are only at 25.6% of our students, or a quarter of our students, meeting state expectations in science. We used to be like 60, 70% when it was content only and paper based. So it's been shocking for staff. Not all staff have seen this yet because it just came out, but it's a little shocking. It's a little unnerving. But then at least you can be like, well, we're at the same average as everyone else in the state. So I'll talk to you about why in a second. 8th grade, we have 48%, so almost half of our students are meeting. That's exciting. And our district, we only have 1 8th grade, so we're at 39. The score of 39.
Yeah.
Not 39%, the score of 39. And the state average score is 39. So again, we are at state average. Find that really interesting that Grade 5, we're at state average and a quarter of our kids are meeting.
Right,
Grade 8, we're at state average and almost half of our kids are meeting. So it's just interesting what's going on between the two grade spans. High school, we only have one high school, so our score is 35, our average score, and the state average score is 36. So we were just below state average. This is third.
third year.
Yep, it is third year.
Yeah.
They changed on another assessment, not this one. It's third year of high school. And so as you can see, we're at 28.9 plus 4, so it's 32.9,
Yeah.
right? 32.9%.
Mm.
So a third
Yeah,
of our students are meeting,
but we meet the
but we're very
average.
close to the state average.
Yeah,
So a quarter to a half to a third. So there's a lot to kind of understand, which is the part of the data I'm looking to try to figure out if I can unpack and get any information from. And then of course, there's an aggregate score where we're sort of at 35%, just over a third across the district.
This was the test that was digital.
Digital,
Where
it's
you're
4 parts,
manipulating
it's
things.
3-hour-long assessments plus a 15-minute kind of inquiry survey. And there's some dynamic elements to the assessment. And then in each of the parts, I'll show you. What's different. So the top is how you can get your points, your scale scored. So let's see. 39 points in 8th grade. At state expectations, 39 points,
at the scaled score. or
must be at
whatever.
the
Yeah.
scaled score is at the top end of below state expectations. Does that make sense? Okay, so you kind of have to go toggle back and
Yeah.
forth to figure it out, but you can see that the disciplines, physical science, life
Wow.
science, and earth science each discipline has a test. So there's 3 parts. They don't take them all at once, because we wouldn't do that to kids. And they can earn raw points for each one. But then these science and engineering practices are woven into each of those discipline assessments. So within life sciences, some of the questions are centered around investigating, some evaluating, and some around reasoning. And they earn points for that. So half the points are around these critical thinking practices, investigating, evaluating, reasoning, not just answering a multiple choice question if it could be yes or no, it's not necessarily content driven. It's
But
content and practice driven.
The scaled score goes to 90, but the 2 sections add up to 95. That's a good trick.
Yeah. I'm still learning.
I know.
There's more papers I can unpack. I just tried to get you the
Yeah,
snapshot,
But that
yeah,
gives you,
it's a little
but that makes
confusing.
sense. You're covering all the science, but I wonder why the paper was so much different. Like, was it,
Because it was just content.
oh, right, it wasn't the process,
yeah.
problem solving
Right.
pieces.
Right,
Practice.
that is exactly the
Okay,
difference. So
got
that's
it.
why I was trying to get to the why.
That makes
The
sense.
difference is
Yeah.
the practices are now intentionally woven into the assessment.
Got it.
Hence the drop.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're really good at teaching content. In some spaces in our district, we're really good at teaching practice too.
Right.
And we need to weave practice into content more intentionally, which will get us to critical thinking. And while we may have individuals that do it, we need to do it systematically and systemically,
Right.
right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Do we have science labs?
Yes.
Yep.
6 through 12. And then we have inquiry-based opportunities through what we call STEM scopes
I was
at
gonna
the
say
elementary
STEM.
school,
Yeah.
but their materials are house friendly, like things, I buy them for them, but it's like straws and magnets and cars and marshmallows and, things
toothpicks.
you'd find around the
Putting a
house.
glass of
Yeah.
water that's marked
Yeah,
into the
Building
freezer.
fridge or
and-
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is new information, the science. We have Maine Mountain Science Alliance Kate Cook. She's Dr. Kate Cook, working with our high school science department this year to understand the standards and how they weave together like this and the implications on instruction. We had Shari Templeton from Maine Math and Science Alliance worked with middle school last year on the same concept. And then we're gonna bridge both those years together towards a curriculum redesign. But we have to understand before we can redesign curriculum,
Right.
right? We have to really deeply understand. So we're spending a year in each space deeply understanding, and then we'll tie it together. And hopefully over time, we'll move the needle on our state assessment scores. That's all I know about science right now.
Very nice.
Any questions?
What do we do about social studies?
So we don't have a state assessment in social studies. We have been revising the middle school social studies curriculum. We have been in an ongoing 1.5, almost 2-year process now at the high school at kind of realigning our work to the state science, social studies standards. Of course, the problem is it takes a while to do it really, really thoughtfully and well. And by the time we're fully implemented, the state every 5 years updates the social studies
I was
standards.
just gonna, yeah.
So that's always fun. We do have common assessments at the high school. We're working at, that's our next step at the middle school, is to get some more of that so that we can kind of, they're not like overbuilt things, they're applied assessments. And then we've got to go backwards into the elementary school and refine that and we're trying to work on our science and social studies refinement to integrate it better into our literacy practices, because there's only so much time in the day. And right now they're all separate. So if something takes precedence, it tends to be literacy over science or social studies. And if we can tie it together better, it'll be more seamless for staff and students.
It will also help with those critical thinking skills on the test.
Yep.
Because they'll be able to
Apply
take
them
what they've
better.
learned.
On your very first slide, it showed the quite a dramatic drop in the 8th grade math. I think between the years of 2018 and on.
Yeah, the pandemic era,
2018 was well
but
before that.
pre-pandemic. So
Any understanding of why
Yeah.
you had such a dramatic drop in math, 8th grade?
good question, Jeff. I knew someone would come up with something. Yes, it's a hypothesis based on my understanding of the context. So in 2017, you transitioned from a long-term curriculum director to a new curriculum director. That year, she did a math review with the middle school. She then selected, or the board approved, a math program called Glencoe Math, which was put in 2018. So in 2017, there was ambiguity about what was coming. In 2018, there was a new math program. So anytime you learn a new program, you usually drop. On top of it, we very quickly learned professional learning that the program consultants offered. This is the first year when I came in the district. That curriculum director was there for 1 year and then I came in. And all of that was set up. So I showed up, the math books arrived, the curriculum, the professional learning people showed up. It was honestly, it was a disaster. And it probably wasn't something that previous curriculum director would have anticipated at all. She marked all the boxes, she did all her checking. It just, their professional learning implementation was not well done at all. And we came to understand that the program was extremely procedural, and our gap is not in procedures. Our gap, we had a math audit done by faculty from UMass Amherst the year I came in. And our gap is in concepts and representations of math, and that program did not support it. So we had like this 2007, you could see the drop from 16 to 17 to 18 to 19. And in that window, we flipped from Glencoe. They used it as a resource instead of the curriculum, and we basically redesigned math instruction since. And now we're slowly seeing a trajectory up.
Well, it's almost like you're kind of reinventing the wheel. Why fix what's not broken, I guess, why would you do that? I mean,
Yeah, it was
it's
before
water
my
over the dam,
time.
but it's like,
But also I will say that elementary was, the first thing I heard from staff when I walked in this district is like, get us a new math program at the elementary level.
Even though they were doing well with the math program that they had.
That was middle school data, so I mean, presuming they came in with some solid foundation, yeah. But the challenge is the assessments change based on the standards had been changing. The tool to instruct had not changed, we're inevitably going to drop at some point anyway unless we caught up. So now we're catching back up.
Have any relation to critical thinking?
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point, is like there's more critical thinking required at all levels. The assessments are changing to support that level more than just procedural. That's the challenge. We were really good at procedures and now we need to be really good at the whole package.
Yeah.
Good question, yeah. And then the pandemic.
Oh, and then that just, yeah.
Just
That
throw
was
that
just a
in,
hot
right?
mess.
Yeah, right.
You know, and readiness to learn matters. And some of it isn't the content we're struggling with, it's the readiness to learn.
And that has a lot to do with socioeconomic factors that are beyond the control of the teachers in the district.
Yeah.
Right.
I do need to transition us quickly, but it's not a vote. So I'm actually just gonna ask for a recommendation. Class size policy.
Yep.
I can share this with you, but we have a policy, I'm playing around with it because it hasn't been updated in a while. In doing that, I thought I was overly ambitious and thought I could come here and be like, here's a class size policy that we can look at and then decide if it goes to the policy committee and then the board. There's some implications. What we're learning based on the profile of our classrooms is technically we can fit X number of students in classrooms. We reduced guidance services in the elementary level. We did increase social work services though, but those are for the most intense students' needs. We have fairly robust class sizes in most grades, in most buildings, but not always, because we have like kindergarten at LER right now is more average than we've seen in the past. Although it looks like the predictor for kindergarten this coming year, LER is going to be much higher than we thought. The needs of students is higher than we've seen, mostly in the kind of emotional readiness and like that readiness to learn stuff. And as you have been made aware, our anxiety levels are higher, the behaviors are higher. While they're dropping in some places, they're higher. 7th grade alone at the middle school, I mean, we're hitting class sizes of 25 on top of like lower academic achievement. So that's going to create some challenges. So generally, the recommendation at most levels is to start thinking about reducing that class size range a little bit and the average class size a little bit, and increasing it a little bit in high school, because theirs is actually some of the lowest class size ranges. And some of that's due to labs. And so trying to make sure we're conscientious of that. However, before I could bring this forward, I realized because of the small school situation we have, we could be in a situation where we would then need a 3rd teacher in some unique spaces. That has a big budgetary implication. And I only sort of came upon this as I was going through the process. I've looked at class size policies from like 15 different places in the state. They're either, they don't have them, other places don't have them, or they're, they informed this thinking. So before I move forward, what I wanted to do was, are you comfortable still considering the class size potential review and shift in the class size policy, even if there are some potential budgetary implications? And if that's the case, do you want me to outline the current and the potential and the cost implication? And if so, I wasn't ready to do that today.
No, I
say, why don't we get the information and then,
I feel like we have to do that to make an informed decision, if you all agree,
Absolutely.
right?
I wouldn't try to make any decision without knowing those things.
Yeah, I think that's
So
right.
what I have is based on what we're experiencing and sort of understanding what makes the right fit for teachers and numbers of students in the room to manage all the changing profiles. But what I don't have is kind of history over time and the budgetary
that's
implications.
fiscal
So
impact.
if you're okay with tabling it, I will follow up and do that part. And then we'll bring it forward either in January or February,
Mhm.
depending upon how much ends up, because we do program of studies and all that in January, and I've got to kind of balance that agenda out.
You need a motion
I just need a recommendation and I just wanted it from you before I made another
to
decision.
move that we follow your recommendation.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so I won't hand this out then. And I will do the next step. And I will try to get that so that it's laid out in advance for you. So it's not the first thing you see is when you come in the meeting. And then, of course, for the public, we'll have it all displayed while we talk it through.
Yep, very good.
I do have one question with the test having moved digital predominantly for almost everything. Can you have a waiver where you have a paper test?
Yes. But it's, it has to be in an IEP.
Oh.
And it has to have standing, so we can't just add it because we want it that way. And of course, there's like the Braille features and all that for someone, the sight challenges. You can also have certain accommodations, some are universal, some are not. Some have to be in IEPs or 504s, small group, text to speech, that kind of
Oh,
thing.
right, okay, yeah. Anyone have anything else? Thank you for staying a little longer than we
Yeah,
anticipated.
sure.
5:13. Thank you, Terry. I think we are good.
And honestly, if we were
I
able to
know.
start on time, we would have ended on time.
Well, that's okay.
Trying
No
so hard,
stress, no
folks.
stress. Everybody's busy. There's lots going on.
It's Okay. important
stuff, so.
Thank you.
That's